Hey, greetings and salutations. My name is Rutson Noor, but that's actually a code name, a secret identity, and the name of this program is called the Secretus Societas Show. And I actually have a thing on my sweatshirt here, says U period, M period, A period, S period, S period. That stands for the University of Massachusetts Alumni Secretus Societas. So I'm discussing this concept of a secret society. This is a picture of kind of like a mystical picture, and the secret society could actually be anything that you want it to be. It could be strictly philosophical kind of a group, or could be a mystical group. Now, the reason why I took that name is that I had Latin for 5 years. I had Latin 4 years in high school and 1 year in college, and I said, this is my opportunity to use Latin, so that's why I chose that, the Secretus Societas. That's Latin for secret society. It was probably a waste of time when I did that Latin studies, and I have kind of a joke about that because I spent a lot of time doing Latin. I spent 3 hours doing my Latin homework because I kept falling asleep on it. I'd have the Latin. I kept falling asleep on it. It took me 3 hours to do the homework in my junior year in high school. And I decided in my senior year, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to get up early in the morning and do my Latin instead. So I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I could get the Latin done in an hour. So yeah, I said, well, that works out a lot better. I get up at 5 o'clock, do my Latin, and I'm all done with it. So I'm not falling asleep on it. But it is kind of a classic type of education, which is what they emphasized 50 years ago. They like to emphasize a classical education, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that nowadays it's more of a technology-oriented society, and the classical education is kind of going on the wayside there. I listened to National Public Radio this morning, and they were discussing about the fact that some colleges are closing. Some of the smaller colleges have 1,000 students or less, and they're having a difficult time keeping up, and they're losing money, so they're actually closing. I think they mentioned something like 12 colleges a year actually close, and that's primarily these smaller colleges. So they're having a difficult time trying to have this traditional classical education, because that's kind of not really as important in this day and age. Most people really need to know a lot more about technology. Unfortunately, I don't know too much about technology, so I can't really do anything. I just had my 50th college reunion last year, and I didn't actually even go to it because I didn't think that I wanted to be bothered with it. It was primarily based on having, a football game and some activities that they had at the college that I wasn't particularly interested in, so I didn't actually even participate with the reunion. But I did have my 50th reunion, so as you can see, I was part of the 1960s counterculture. Yes, I had a lot of good times there in the counterculture because I grew up in the 1960s, and my primary influence was the Beatles. So I did get a lot of information from school and from my fellow students, but I primarily got my information through music. And I was a musician, and I'm still a musician. I played a lot of music. I was in the high school music program. I did a marching band, concert band, orchestra, jazz band. I did all that in high school, so I did have a lot more experience with music in high school than anything else, but I did have a lot of classes that I had to take that I wasn't particularly interested in, but as you know, you're required to take certain classes, so I did take those classes. But the funny thing about that experience in high school is that I happened to get a hold of my cousin's college philosophy book, and I thought that was pretty good there. So I said, oh, gee, I like this philosophy book. So I actually have on my existentialist hat on. I call it an existentialist hat because existentialism was what I kind of classified myself as in high school, and some people might not really know what existentialism is. And the definition in that book that I had was existentialism is an attitude and an outlook which emphasizes human existence and the qualities that are distinctive in individual persons as opposed to man in abstract nature or the world in general. But, that's a lot of gobbledygook there that people might be kind of thinking it's kind of getting into unusual mindsets, and in this day and age, anything that's kind of outside of the mainstream is kind of considered taboo. So I wanted to discuss this book that I have here because I heard about it on the radio. I said, oh, I think I might be able to make a program, The College Scam. And I said, oh man, I'm going to have to read this book. Unfortunately, this book bummed me out so much I couldn't even read through it. I think I got like halfway through the book there, and I couldn't get through it. The reason is that I went through the 1960s counterculture, and in this day and age, they would classify those as left-wing radical students from the 1960s. But I was basically an existentialist. I wasn't an activist. So, I kind of enjoyed college as a college experience. And I did not go to summer camp because I grew up in poverty. So I never went to summer camp. So I considered college as kind of my summer camp experience. I'm going to read about this, but I'm going to put this down for the time being. The reason why it was a summer camp experience because I enjoyed some of the activities that I did. Well, I did the golf, bowling, archery, swimming, volleyball. So there was all these little sports activities, which was actually a requirement, but I enjoyed those activities, so I had a kind of a summer camp experience while I was in college, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in this day and age, you're spending a lot of money on college, and some people may want to discontinue some of those things there because they want to have more job-related type of instruction as opposed to just a general existentialist kind of instructions there. But I did enjoy doing some of those activities, and I did play volleyball when I went on the 4th of July parades. I went back to my hometown and played in the 4th of July parade, and then I went to my cousin's house and we played volleyball. I said, yeah, I like playing volleyball, so we played volleyball. Nothing wrong with that. But I don't know if they still do some of this stuff in colleges, but I'm guessing they might have a minimum amount of these extracurricular activities. I know that I saw people doing fencing and judo and all this other stuff. So there are lots of different options available. Students like to take some of these things. Whether you do them after you graduate is another story, because like I said, I was interested in philosophy. And what the story was about that is that when I graduated from high school, I got my picture in the newspaper and I said that, oh, I'm going to study philosophy in college. So when my father read that in a newspaper, he got mad as hell. He said, "You're not going to be studying philosophy. You're going to study education because you're going to become a school teacher." I said, well, okay, I guess I'll study education. He insisted on the fact that I had to become a school teacher. I guess school teachers were a part of that family that I was in, so he figured I'd just kind of follow in that family tradition. And I knew right from the beginning that I wasn't really particularly interested in teaching, but I was interested in music, so I spent 20 years teaching drum lessons, but I only taught in public school for a year and a half, so I was kind of not that interested in teaching in a public school. I did try to check on getting jobs at that time, and the problem at that time was the education majors back in the 70s were a dime a dozen, so there was quite a number of people that had the similar qualifications that I had. But there was a program about 10 years ago on National Public Radio, and they were discussing, why aren't there more males in elementary education? And they had this hour-long program, and I guess the school systems are kind of reluctant to hire men in elementary education. I don't know what their reasoning is. I never had any male for a teacher in elementary school, and I remember there was one male teacher in elementary school, and he was kind of like the sports guy. So if you wanted to do sports, you'd have to do something with this one guy that was in the elementary school. But there was a program about men not really being hired in elementary education. So I didn't really get any job, even though I did apply numerous times about getting a job, because I did get a degree in elementary education, and I worked with first, second, and third graders, but I'm not really qualified to do anything except babysitting, so I can't really do these jobs that they have today that requires a technical training. If I wanted to be working with children, I probably could do that. But from my experience, because I had at least 24 different jobs over my lifetime, I worked on a lot of jobs, so I had a pretty good perspective on the job world. And one thing that I recommend when you get a job, whether it's a professional job or a temporary job, is that after you're there for a while, you rate the job on a scale of 1 to 10. So you said, well, do I like this job? Am I getting anything out of this job? And most of the jobs that I had weren't really that highly rated. The last job that I had, I delivered auto parts, and I rated that job as a 5. 1 being really bad and 10 being really good. The reason why I rated it as a 5 is that there was some heavy lifting involved. You had to be lifting heavy rotors and all kinds of heavy things, and I started having trouble lifting things, and so I didn't particularly like the lifting part of it, but I did like driving because I listened to talk radio, so I did get a lot of information on the radio. And this was a number of years ago. I listened to a radio psychologist Her name was Dr. Joy Brown, and she was having this talk radio program. And I liked to listen to her, and she said, men between the ages of 25 and 55 primarily get their identity through their job. And I said, well, I only worked on part-time jobs, so I don't know if I can get my identity through my job. And the reason why I took part-time jobs is that I wanted to have free time to play music because I was interested in music, and I played in a lot of different music groups. So I played in marching bands and concert bands, and I did swing band and Dixieland band, and I played in a fife and drum group, so I did Civil War type of music. That was from the 1800s because that was the music that they did in the 1800s, so it was a Civil War reenactment group. I actually enjoyed doing that because I had a chance to do music, so I did a lot of parades with that group. Unfortunately, I did not get paid for it. My mother was kind of annoyed because I was spending a lot of time doing this Civil War stuff that we'd go off to do Civil War reenactments. It was a pretty good time. I enjoyed doing that. You know, we spent a weekend setting up camp, and it was kind of funny because we were in a thing that was called, it was a modern camp. You have in the Civil War groups there the modern camp and the authentic camp. So if you went to the authentic camp, everything had to be authentic. You couldn't even have a can, you know, like a can of soda or something like that, because that wasn't authentic. So you had to have, like, everything had to be authentic. So we stayed in the we stayed in the modern camp because most of the guys that I was involved with were World War II veterans, so they were in it for a good time, so they'd bring in a lot of beer, and they'd like to be having a good time in the camp there, and I brought my percussion instruments in, and they were playing these percussion instruments, and they were having a good time, and one of my fellow musicians called it jollification. That was the word that he used. He said, "It's time for jollification." And he'd be doing his guitar thing and singing songs, and guys would be playing the percussion instruments, and it was a pretty good time. I enjoyed that. It was a pretty good experience, and I do recommend getting involved with a group. If you like music, you might want to do that. Like I said, you didn't get paid for it, so unfortunately I left the group there because my mother died, and I actually had to work on jobs. I said, oh man, now I got to work on a job there. So I ended up leaving the group there, and what was funny about that is that I ended up working on, back in 1999, I had 5 part-time jobs in one day. That's what it came out to because I didn't really have a professional job, so I had to be working on a bunch of part-time jobs. And I'll tell you these part-time jobs that I worked on. So I worked from 8 to 12 delivering auto parts. And then I had to go deliver meals to the elderly for the town of Amherst from 12 to 1:30. And then I did the Salvation Army during the Christmas season. So I went and did my Salvation Army thing. They had bell ringers, but I did drumming. So I did drumming for the Salvation Army from 2 to 5. And then I said, oh, now I got to go on my next job. So I went to clean an office in Amherst from 5 to 8. So I did that, and then I worked at the Mullins Center, and I cleaned up after basketball games and activities over at the Mullins Center, primarily like from 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock until midnight or so. So 5 jobs in one day. So I said I'd just go from one job to another. I didn't mind doing that, but I did that for a couple of years, and finally I said I can't really do this anymore. So what happened was that a lot of these jobs didn't take money out from my taxes, and I ended up owing $2,000 on taxes, and I had to file for bankruptcy. I had to file for bankruptcy because I ended up owing $2,000 in taxes, and you're required to pay your taxes, but you're not required to pay your credit card. So I'm telling you some secrets here. I ran up credit cards to $50,000 because I only had part-time jobs and I had to buy everything on credit cards. They kept sending me credit cards all the time. I said, oh, here's another credit card, I'm going to use it. So I ran up these credit cards. It was $50,000, but I only owed $2,000 on taxes. So, so I made a $48,000 profit there by filing for bankruptcy. So that worked out okay. But then after that, I ended up working on regular jobs. So I had 2 part-time jobs, but it amounted to working between 50 and 60 hours a week. So I had one job in the morning and one job at night. So I did end up working for a number of years between 50 and 60 hours a week. I delivered auto parts during the day, and I worked at Wendy's at night. And the Wendy's job was from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. So I did that for 7 years. So it was okay. I made lots of money. So naturally, I ran up credit cards again because I said, oh, I got all this money here. I'm making all kinds of money. So I'm going to start using credit cards again. And so I ran up credit cards again, and it was $30,000. And so I ran up credit cards to $30,000. So I said, I'm going to be collecting Social Security when I'm turning 62, and I'm only allowed to work on one part-time job. So my retirement plans were to file for bankruptcy a second time for my retirement plan. So that's what I did. Filing for bankruptcy were my retirement plans. So I ended up filing for bankruptcy twice. So there's nothing wrong with that. Donald Trump filed for bankruptcy numerous times, or what did they say, about 4 times or something like that. So the establishment does this all the time. They like to use bankruptcy to get out of these commitments. And I had my last mortgage company was trying to collect money from me, claiming that I didn't make my mortgage payments. I did have my checks to show I didn't make mortgage payments, but they were trying to foreclose on me, and I filed a complaint with the Federal Reserve. I gave them all the information. I showed them my checks. I said, they're claiming I didn't make my payments. Here's my checks. You can see that they cashed my checks. And what happened? The mortgage company filed for bankruptcy. So they just gave my mortgage to another company. So the establishment uses this bankruptcy thing as a tactic to get out of commitments. I guess Johnson & Johnson did the same thing. They filed for bankruptcy. It's a multi-million-dollar company, but as you know, I think because of the thing about the opioids, they put that into another company, and that company filed for bankruptcy. It's one of those legal tactics that the establishment uses. So I'm not really an establishment guy, but I do recommend bankruptcy for people that have problems there. The bankruptcy has gone up in price, so I don't know if you can actually afford to do that. It's probably a lot more expensive now than it was 10 years ago. So I filed for bankruptcy 10 years ago, so it's probably not on my record now, but it cost me like $1,200 then. I'm guessing it's probably $2,000 or more now. I have no idea. I could file for bankruptcy a third time, but I don't know. I'm not really that interested in spending money for lawyers, but I want to get into this book here because I went through college and I enjoyed my college experience, and I classified myself as a college existentialist, not a college activist, which was popular back in the 60s, and they were very anti-war and anti-establishment, so I had that mindset. And like I said, they might be classified as left-wing radicals, which people might say they are now, but I'm going to talk about this book because this was written by a so-called right-wing radical. So I'm going to read some of the stuff here. I couldn't get through this book. It was just too contrary for me. The ideas, they were pretty good ideas, so I'm going to talk about this book, but I'm going to read it from the back forward, some of the things here. And I'm going to change my glasses here because I'm going to be putting on my existentialist glasses. I can't see with these glasses because they're like 5-year-old prescription, and this is only 1-year-old prescription, so I can actually see better with my sunglasses. And I got my existentialist outfit on now with my hat and my glasses. I'm going to read the back. Don't go to college without reading this book by Donald Trump Jr. The College Scam by Charlie Kirk is a must-have for any parent who cares about their child and for any student who cares about their future. An eye-opening book that will make you think twice before you fill out that college application. Senator Rand Paul. Charlie Kirk is on a mission to save future generations from the left's indoctrination of our children. Thanks to Charlie's leadership, thousands of young adults are standing up to liberals by unleashing common sense, conservative perspectives grounded in the fundamental principles of our great nation. Lauren Boebert. This book is a must-read for anybody thinking about sending their kids into the cesspool of colleges. Ooh, he's classifying colleges as a cesspool. Well, like I said, he is a right-wing radical, and I'm kind of a left-wing radical. So, like I said, I went to college in the 60s and liked the Beatles, and when I went to college, there was nothing really unusual. We had that Woodstock. People were, if you saw that Woodstock movie, you saw people would be running around Woodstock naked, which was really a popular thing at that time, going naked. And when I was at UMass during the finals there, they had a rock concert at the pond there, and people were dancing naked right in front of me. It was blowing my mind. I said, oh man, what's going on here? Oh, I guess this is the counterculture. So they would probably freak out nowadays if people danced around naked, but it was really typical in my day and age. And what was the main thing that happened at the time that I was in college was the Kent State shootings, because of the protests about the anti-war protesters at Kent State, and the National Guard killed numerous students at Kent State, and that was the big thing in my day and age. So that was the thing. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young had the song about the Kent State shootings, and unfortunately David Crosby, I heard on the news just last night that he just passed away, unfortunately, but he was part of that radical counterculture. which I guess people nowadays are not particularly interested in. I'm kind of equating this to like when I was growing up. I preferred listening to the music from the 60s. I didn't care about music from the 40s, 80s. I did play music from the 40s because I did swing band music because I was a drummer, so I did the drumming thing. So I did have experience with the swing band music, but I definitely did not like swing band music when I was in college. So that's what I'm kind of equating this to. They kind of take the music that's popular at the time that they're in school, and that's not really a very good perspective because, like I said, I enjoyed playing drums, and I did swing band music, and I did Dixieland music, which was, I guess, popular like in the 20s and the 30s. So I did that kind of music, and I actually enjoyed doing that music. And I did fife and drum music, which was from the 1800s. So I have a pretty wide perspective on playing different types of music. But when you go to college and then you try to fit in there, it's kind of like this group think mentality that they have in college that I personally think it's a little bit oppressive, and he talks about this in this book here, and I want to discuss more about this book, but this group think thing I think is kind of interesting because I work as a street musician now, so I'm outside in the cold weather, like it might be 20 degrees outside. So it's 20 degrees outside, and I see some people walking around in T-shirts and short pants on, and it's like 20 degrees outside. I said, either these people are students or they're mentally disturbed. I said, oh, what's going on here? There's 20 degrees. They're walking around in short pants and a T-shirt there. It's freezing out here, but that's the group think thing. So I guess they want to fit into their college mindset. They said, I'm going to put on my T-shirt and my short pants. Even though it might be 20 degrees or 10 degrees outside, I'm still going to be walking around like this, like it was the 4th of July, even though it's actually January. So this groupthink thing, I think, is a little bit goofy. So I'm going to read more about this book here. And now the story about the author of this book. Charlie Kirk is the founder and president of Turning Point USA, the largest and fastest growing conservative youth activist organization in the country with 400,000 student members, 450 full and part-time staff, and a presence on over 2,500 high school and college campuses nationwide. Charlie's social media reaches over 100 million people per month, and Axios has named Charlie as one of the top 10 most engaged handles in the world. A New York Times and Amazon best-selling author of The MAGA Doctrine, the only ideas that will win the future. Charlie is also the host of the Charlie Kirk Show podcast, which was downloaded over 120 million times in the last 12 months and regularly ranks among the top 10 shows on Apple Podcast news charts. As of October 2020, Charlie took his podcast to broadcast, nationally syndicating his show on over 120 radio stations and across the Salem radio network. So this guy is a really famous right-wing guy. Well, that's what the mindset is in this day and age. So naturally, when they see people like me, and I got my beard on because I look like Gabby Hayes from from the Gene Autry movies that were popular in the 1950s. We had the Westerns, we had Hopalong Cassidy, Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, and I kind of look like Gabby Hayes. That's like a bygone era, but I'm going to put my glasses on here. Gabby Hayes was one of the characters with Gene Autry, and they had a lot of these Westerns on, and I think they took off these Westerns from the TV stations because they didn't like it. They didn't like the idea of all these people going out and shooting people, and they think that the gun thing is really a bad thing. Of course, I think the conservatives do like the gun thing, so if you don't like the gun thing, maybe you're not really a conservative, but I don't know. When I was in college, I had a class. I'm going to take these glasses off again. I had a philosophy class at the School of Education by a professor called Sid Simon. And Sid Simon had, his class was on values clarification. And that was the philosophy of life that I embraced, values clarification. That was the thing that I liked, so I took that as my philosophy of life. So my father was the one that wanted me to go into education, and I tried it out for a year and a half, and I was not really that interested in that. So when my father died just before I graduated from college, I stayed in the education for a year, but I didn't feel obligated to do that job. I said, well, my father died. I don't feel obligated to do that job. I'm going to do my music instead. And like I said, I did teach music for 20 years. But values clarification is important. Your values dictate the essential you. So if you are a conservative, you probably like this book there. But like I said, I couldn't get through this book. And what's funny about it, you could open this book up to any page in the book, and there's going to be some kind of controversial thing that he says in this book. Any page, you open this book up to any page. I'm going to demonstrate. I'm just going to pick any page in this book here. Let's open up here. This is what it says on this page. On the whole, students get surprisingly little value from college. Standards are low, and the curriculum is weak. Many faculty members are more concerned with being popular than with sound education. Low achievement in high school means that many students will enter college with poor skills, but with the expectation that they'll receive high grades for minimal work. To keep those kids happy and paying, most colleges have decided to accommodate their desires. Okay, that was that page. But you can open up to any page in this book, and there's going to be some interesting concepts. Let's try another page. Yeah, that's just a little bit of information. Let me try another page. Let's see what's on this page here. That's SpongeBob. I'll read some of this thing here. You may know that Bikini Atoll is where in 1946 the U.S. government removed 167 indigenous Bikinians before using the site for a series of nuclear tests. The Bikinians suffered greatly due to hunger and radioactive fallout. Professor Barker warns the world to be aware of the plight of the Bikinian people, and that's a noble goal. But it's lunacy to blame SpongeBob SquarePants for increasing the suffering of the Bikinian people, yet that's exactly the bizarre claim Professor Barker mocks. SpongeBob's presence on Bikini's bottom continues the violent and racist expulsion of indigenous peoples from their lands that enables U.S. hegemonic powers to extend their military and colonial interests in post-war era. Well, there's a lot of philosophical stuff there, so I'm going to pick another page here because any page that you turn to is going to be interesting. Here's another one here. When students are repeatedly taught to view words and ideas or even ideological neutrality as, quote, violence, then it's inevitable that they will see violence as an appropriate response to opposing viewpoints. Oh, what do you think about that concept? And it's right here in the book here. Okay, well, that's that page. Let's pick another page. I'm always eager to have a conversation with people who would disagree with me. But Antifa radicals, these mostly white, indoctrinated, trust fund kids, have no interest in a conversation. Their conversation is incoherent screaming, dumping a drink on someone, or in some cases, a bike lock to the head. Moments after the young woman threw water on me, Philadelphia police stepped in to move the protesters back. The police officers were mostly black and Hispanic, and several were female. The protesters, mostly white, started chanting, "No good cops in a racist system." These privileged protesters were completely oblivious to the irony. They were self-proclaimed anti-fascist, using textbook fascist tactics, and they themselves were the very bourgeoisie they were protesting. Their parents obviously had money, because these kids had plenty of time to protest and didn't need jobs. Their bourgeois parents paid the bills and made the sacrifices to send them to college, where they learned to despise the hand that fed them. Okay, this is some of the propaganda here in the book here. I'm going to pick another page here. Yeah, as you can see now, you might agree with some of this stuff and you might not agree with it. I thought it was an interesting book, The College Scam. You might want to run out and get the book right away. Or it might be banned in a library. They might have it banned there. Of course, the story about libraries and banning books in libraries, if it's not in the library, just go out to the bookstore and buy it. You don't necessarily have to have the town go out and buy a book that people might not like to have in the library. So just go out and buy the book. So The College Scam, you might want to get that book. Okay, let's pick another thing here. Oh, here's an interesting thing here. It says, critical race theory is not leading America into a new utopia of racial harmony and justice. I'm going to just keep going here. I don't know. Here's one here. Professors out of control. The professors, they're out of control. Okay, in a video you can view on YouTube, Penn State sociology professor Sam Richards shames two white male students because of the color of their skin, telling them they are oppressive, arrogant, and dumb because they are white. Richards is also white. The video has live streamed on March 4th, 2021, and captured by Campus Reform before Professor Richards made it private and unavailable. The video opens with Richards praising the Coca-Cola Company's neo-racist diversity training program and posting a quote from the Coca-Cola indoctrination materials. To be less white is to be less oppressive, be less arrogant, be less certain, be less defensive, be less ignorant, be more humble, listen, believe, break with party, break with white solidarity. Well, this is what this book is all about here. If you agree with the stuff there, you can run out and buy this book there. I'm sure that some people probably agree with the stuff there. But unfortunately, I was a little bit reluctant to do this program today because I don't want to be blamed for people who said, well, I'm not going to go to this college because this college is kind of a left-wing organization, and I'm not going to go to that college there. So I don't want to be blamed for that. So I'm just bringing this up because I had values clarification, and this is an idea about values clarification. And I said that my values was that I decided not to work on a full-time job. I didn't want to go to job prison. Oh, God, I don't want to go to job prison. I have to be 8 hours a day in job prison. So I said I'd rather work part-time on a job that I don't like instead of full-time on a job that I don't like. It's my own personal philosophy. It's not necessarily a pragmatic philosophy. Like I said, I did have 5 jobs in one day. Not really a pragmatic philosophy, but I said, well, I don't really want to go to job prison, so I'm not promoting this as a philosophy. I'm sure that most of you are capitalists, and I was a capitalist. I was a card-carrying capitalist. I did file for bankruptcy twice, so I was a card-carrying capitalist. Unfortunately, I worked on part-time jobs, so couldn't really do stuff there. But like I said, I was part of the so-called counterculture, and the counterculture preferred to do things in an alternative fashion. So my concept about this job thing, and this is my own thing, but I'm sure that many of you will agree. I say the personality dictates the job. The job does not dictate the personality. So the latter would be like the military. You go into the military and you're forced to, use guns and stuff, and that was the job is dictating your personality. So that's an example. The personality dictates the job. So my idea about that is people that go into the profession like policing and stuff, they tended to be bullies as personality characteristics, so they went into that profession because they enjoyed being that way because of their personality. So the personality dictated the job didn't dictate the personality. I like music, so I wanted to do music. I'm not qualified as a music teacher, so I just could teach drum lessons. I can't be a public school music teacher because that's a very difficult thing. You have to be studying all the different instruments and everything. I couldn't really do that. So I'm going to be finishing up here. I want to read a couple of more things from this controversial book, just in case you're really interested. But let me read the beginning, because this is important here. It says, putting the college industry on trial in the college scam, Charlie Kirk lays out a 10-count indictment along with all the evidence of how the college industry has become completely corrupt at student and taxpayer expense, revealing over 10 troubling realities. Kirk unpacks just how destructive the universities in America have become. And I'm going to read these to you, and you might agree with this. Count 1. Colleges and universities are running a scam. Count 2, a college education is ridiculously overpriced. Count 3, universities have become obscenely rich as students at student and taxpayer expense. Count 4, colleges do not educate anymore. Count 5, college ruins the ability to think and reason. Count 6, college indoctrinates students and represses speech. Count 7, colleges and universities breed violence and hate. Count 8, colleges and universities have been infiltrated by subversive foreign groups. Count 9, colleges and universities have unleashed waves of woke, anti-American
activists. Count 10. Many professors are leftist radicals bent on indoctrinating students. And this is how he ends up. That's my 10-count indictment. I will make the case count by count. Then I will submit the case to you for a decision. You are the jury. You will examine the evidence. You will reach a verdict. And I have full confidence in your verdict. Charlie Kirk from the introduction. The College Scam by Charlie Kirk, a right-wing radical, if I do say so myself. So I'm finishing up with that. I'm going to put my glasses on. I personally couldn't get through that book, but some of you probably agree with those concepts. I hope that they don't take this program off the air, because I'm sure that if I have this on the internet, people are going to complain. And they said, we don't want that program on the internet because he's talking about a book that should be banned in the libraries. We don't want that book in the library. Well, just go to the bookstore and buy it. That's what you want to do. Your values controls the essential you. So if those are your values, go right ahead. I'm from the so-called counterculture. Yeah, I like the Beatles there. Don't forget, John Lennon did pose naked with Yoko Ono on the record album. He was naked on the front and the back of a record album. And that started the naked revolution, I think, in the 60s. That's why I saw people dancing around. John Lennon danced around naked. I said, I guess people are thinking they're going to start dancing around naked there. John Lennon did it, so people are going to be doing it now. That was the thing from the 1960s. Maybe you'll see more people dancing around naked in this day and age. They're going to maybe have a different mindset. They might want to get out of this mindset here. Nothing wrong with this mindset. I don't say there's anything wrong with it. It's particular values. I don't have any problem if somebody wants to consider themselves a conservative. Nothing wrong with that. I don't see anything wrong with that. It's when they impose on you, that's when the problem is a problem, because I don't like other people imposing their values on me. So I have different values, and primarily when you work on a job, they do indoctrinate you. And like I said, that I had a job, and I had to be studying their things on the computer. I had to be taking classes on the computer, so I went through all this stuff on the computer. They said, oh, you're classified as a racist or something if you make some kind of comments or something. So they do have training in the job thing. So if you don't go to college, you will still have training on the job training. So good luck with that. So I'm going to say, hasta la vista, baby.